This is clip 7 of the topic of interviews. We moved to focus group interviews. I'm telling you, these are hard to do. Participants are a collection of people with similar experiences that relate to the research question. The reason they're difficult is because one person can dominate the conversation. The validity issues are legion because a stronger personality could intimidate somebody who had a dissenting view from the group to express himself. And so, but there are people in political science who do these very well. They're used in politics and other kinds of political science issues. Then there are convergent interviews as action research, and these are very interesting. I just finished an action research project, and we did them because as you go along in action research, the purpose is to revise what you're finding on. And you could put some quantitative data here to see what kind of progress, depending on your research question, these people are making, or are they regressing. What I included here is a website that has some nifty little diagrams, mini action research diagrams that in the diagram itself will give you a lot of insight into what these interviews involve, and then how you move in and maybe even change the procedures in the study according to the participants to better meet the purpose of the research project. Then there are postmodern interviews, which are very unstructured. I gave an example of course, dropouts are in high school are a big problem. So that's our problem statement, which I didn't actually include here. I just started with the research question: how do a group of students who dropped out of high school view and define themselves? Which is not unlike the self-efficacy issue in Dr. Maiden's questionnaire in the lecture he gave on the study that he did with college and graduate students. So in a postmodern interview, the researcher might ask a participant bring a list of artifacts to the interview that represent who she or he is. So photographs, it's up for grabs, let it go. Now I have a few techniques to cover before we end. In collecting interviews, I guess it flows from what we've talked about before, but they're techniques that don't necessarily just relate to one type of interview, which is how I've structured this lecture so far, because these are a little bit more generic than what I've talked about. There's the cluster method, where you have, and I have a little diagram where you write the phenomenon under investigation, like what's the core issue in the research question, and even before that in the problem, and then have participants draw lines from the core and name them, and then you come in and interview the participant, like what's this mean, how's it related, to the core phenomenon. We would call that the dependent variable. I'm looking at my esteemed colleague in quantitative research. Whenever there are times to make connections, I try to do that, although there are qualitative researchers that would not like that because they say what we do is completely different. But we're all just trying to understand people and programs and education, but you might want to take that out after this class is over, but then I don't really care. Okay, so here's some other techniques. And Dr. Maiden also had a photography class, was his only qualitative class in graduate school, which he didn't learn too much from. But maybe I'm going to convince him a little bit that there is some utility. Is your research question might be continuing on the identity issue from the high school dropouts, and I have a photograph that responds to, before the interview, ask the participant to bring a photograph and what it says about himself. And so I brought this one that you're seeing. I'm going to turn it right here for my colleague. And what's interesting about this is I think it tells that my self-esteem is different from my daughter's, because when she looked at this, she said, that means if she had brought this it would mean that she's an individual, she stands out from the crowd, she's very proud of that. If I had brought it in, I would say alienated, not accepted by the majority of people. And yet we're the same type of person. Maybe it's generational, maybe we need some more independent variables to come to that conclusion. But anyway, so that's a good starter. Now, we're going to finish this with the next clip.